Have you ever wondered what the long-term effects are of tying knots in your dreadlocks to repair weak spots? Well, to get my thoughts on this technique, stay tuned. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Atreyu channel, home of the Sebbies. Thank you for clicking on this video. This channel is all about locks, from lock care to lock repair and a lot of other things. Before we get started, I'm going to just quickly ask you to please scroll down a little bit as I'm talking and hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, and hit the like button. Alright, so let's get to today's question. It comes from Shayla Morast and she writes, here's a question I have for you. One of my locks at the nape of my neck have thinned out and I'm wondering if tying a knot in it would be a good idea. I have never seen the long-term effects of doing so and also don't know what it actually does. What are your thoughts on this? So to be honest, I've never tied knots in my dreadlocks because I always used the beard method once I discovered there was a need to repair weak spots in my locks. I think the first person I saw do it was Pretty Poison 27, and I also think I saw Keisha Charmaine do it. So right off the bat, Shayla, I'm just going to suggest that you hit them up, send them well, I guess you can't really do private messages anymore on YouTube, but you can comment or something, or maybe DM them and ask them what that really did for their locks. Meaning, was it a permanent fix, or did it not really help the situation at all, or did it actually make it worse? So I can say from the videos that I watched where those two ladies demonstrated how to do it, the point of it was to strengthen that area by congregating more of the hairs together when you tie a knot, right? The downside to doing it is that you do lose a little bit of length. I remember distinctly in Keisha Charmaine's video, she had to tie several knots to completely eliminate the weak spot. So I don't know, maybe like 5 or 6 little knots together, because slowly but surely the weakened area decreased and decreased and decreased, and then you just had knots, like knot. And then she followed that up with palm rolling to smooth it out so that it wasn't really noticeable. It was really impressive, but I don't know if she had any more problems with it or if the weak spot reappeared or what. So as I said, you might want to ask them. What I can say is that the reason that I like using hair, in this case my beard hair, to repair my weak spots is because that hair ends up tangling with the hair above and below the weak spot. So let me show you on a sheet of paper what I mean. Okay, so off to the left we have a lock and we have a weak spot right here, right? And so what I propose people do, if they can, if they have that luxury, dudes out there, is to use beard hair, because this beard hair, this tip right there and that tip right there will connect. So I'm saying that this beard hair will merge with those hairs, and these hairs right here, those strands, will merge with those hairs. And so what you have is this reinforcement, because not only is this lock and everything below it hanging on by these few strands here, but once you use the beard hair and everything has matted together, you have everything below being held on by all of these hairs. So that's why I prefer to use hair, okay? In this case, beard hair for my locks. Now, going back to the people that tie knots, or the people that I've seen do it, I think the theory is that if you tie a knot in the lock, I mean, you guys, everyone has tied a knot before, right? Go back to this right quick. Say someone was tugging on this and there was a lot of force on this. You could see this snapping, eventually, right? But think about someone tugging here on this. It's almost like the force is being displaced because of the knot, right? Because that force is somewhat redirected. Of course, you're still applying some force here when you pull down here, but I think it absorbs a lot of the force. And so the more knots you put into your lock to strengthen that weak spot, the stronger the lock ends up being. I think that's what people are thinking when they do it. Now, I intentionally only tied 3 knots in this lock, because I want to show you that there could still be spaces. I remember seeing this in Keisha Charmaine's video, you know, after she had tied maybe 2 or 3 knots, there were still spaces, which is why she continued to tie more knots. And so if there are still spaces there, then if you pull hard enough, eventually that force is going to break those spots, right? Because they're not reinforced. So I think if you're gonna tie knots, you have to tie a lot of knots, right? To make sure that you don't have any weak spots in between the knots. But honestly, that's the best explanation that I can give for why people tie knots in their locks, okay? And this is, remember, coming from someone who does not use that technique. So Shayla, hopefully that helps you better understand why people tie knots in their dreadlocks. They're obviously trying to salvage their dreadlock. They don't want it to fall. No locker wants their lock to fall out, right? And it's an attempt to strengthen that weak spot. Once again, I have no idea what the long-term effects are of tying knots into your dreadlocks because I've never had to do it. I mean, I can't see it necessarily damaging your lock, right? It's just a knot. So it's not like you just poured some bleach on your locks, right? It might be a little bit bumpy if it's a big, you know, if you don't pull it tight enough or whatever. But I think you also need to be careful even when you're attempting to tie the knot, because remember, you're dealing with a weak spot, so it could snap right then and there. So you talked about how locks at the nape of your neck have thinned out. I'm curious about why. I mean, I know a lot of people's texture is really soft back there. Mine is definitely softer. And a lot of people have a hard time getting their locks to lock up back there too. But why have your locks thinned out? This is what I suggest to you. If you have new growth, like the scalp isn't thinning, but the locks themselves have just thinned out, but you're still getting new growth, I would wait a little bit, maybe 1 or 2 months to get some good new growth there. And then I would braid that new growth into the lock, okay? So my response to anyone who is ever complaining about thinning locks, but they have new growth at the scalp, is to braid that new growth into the locks. It has worked wonders for me, and it really keeps the hair in place. So Shayla, I hope this answers your question. I know that it's not, you know, okay, this is your answer, because I just don't have experience with tying knots. But hopefully, at the very least, this video can point you to a solution with thinned out locks, and it can point you to someone who can actually better answer your question for you. So if anyone else has any questions for me, feel free to submit them to me in an Ask Atreyu video, where I will be more than happy to take a stab at it. I'm gonna get out of here. So as always, please learn to love unconditionally, because loving with conditions conditions the heart to not really love at all. Atreyu is out.